This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine.
Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and of course my esteemed co-host Mike Gast is here, former Vice President of Communications for Campgrounds of America, and this is another episode of WCM's Park Update, and we're very happy to have Phil Ticknor on today. He is the founder of the Jellyheads Facebook community groups. I guess they have a Facebook page and they have a community that you can join. I guess, Phil, just give us a little bit of background on the groups. It's pretty much geared towards Jellystone campers, right?
Yeah, so I'll give you the quick history. I went looking for a general Jellystone Facebook group, 4 years ago almost now, and it didn't exist. So I did what any insane person would do, and I started one. So it's just started off just sort of inviting friends. I think I posted it in like one glamping group, and then God bless all the Jellystone Park sites that did not ban me for spamming their comments with links to the group so we could try to build it. But that's how it all started.
So, Phil, you if you're a Jellystone fan, you must have a trailer load of kids.
No, well, we have two, but when we started this, we just had the one. So we have, and it's quite the age gap. So I think we've extended our Jellystone appeal because my younger daughter is only a year and a half. So we've added time to it. My oldest one will be 10. So the clock was starting to tick. We'll hopefully we'll keep her interested and invested for at least a few more years.
Well, let's give Jellystone the plug. What about Jellystone Parks appealed so much to you that you would do something like this?
Well, I mean, I have to cop to the fact that it's the only campgrounds we've ever stayed at. But I think, like many people who probably stay at the Jellystones or some of the other large resort-style campgrounds, we aren't necessarily, traditional campers. We're not spending nights in tents in state parks or anything like that. But it's a nice combination of sort of that low-key, outdoorsy type of feel where you can have a nice outdoor-oriented vacation without actually roughing it, and there's plenty of things to do and activities for the kids and everything like that. So I think it's a nice sort of blend of two different kinds of vacations.
What is your camping style, Phil?
Well, we have spent exactly 2 nights in an accommodation without a bathroom, and it was literally right next to a comfort station. So it is typically cabins. One of our stops along the way this summer will be staying in an on-site RV rental. That'll be the first for us. It'll be neat. And we have done a covered wagon, but surprisingly there was a bathroom in that covered wagon as well. So that was really a beautiful accommodation at Jellystone, Milton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. What? So have you guys ever done like any tent camping, or is it basically just like accommodations?
So we own a 4-person tent that my mother-in-law bought me for Christmas a few years ago, and it's only ever been used in our living room. Okay. So my daughter has done sleepovers in it, but that's it. We can't even get her to go in the backyard and try that. I would try that. My wife says she would do tent camping, but getting the rest of the group on board is probably an uphill battle for her.
Well, before we get into the Facebook page, as the old KOA executive, what would it take to get you to try to expand your horizons a little bit? Are you so locked into Jellystone that you're not gonna go anywhere else?
So I mean, to go anywhere else is a question. I mean, to sort of come out of this niche from a social media perspective is a separate question. I think I always joke around with my wife because her big interest growing up, and we do like it too, is Disney World. So Fort Wilderness is probably number 1 on the list of other campgrounds we would visit. But I, certainly open to it. I just don't know from a social perspective, and it's been interesting because I know, there for many people who start in a very niche realm on social media, they do end up expanding or broadening. I don't envision that happening anytime soon, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I live pretty close to the Fremont, Indiana Jellystone, which I think is owned by Sun Communities now. I think it sold like a year or 2 ago. But that's a pretty nice Jellystone. They do day passes to the water park, so I've been to like the water park area. I mean, I think that's a really neat thing that Jellystones do is they have those huge water attractions and they can bring in people through that as well. So, I mean, they're really neat resorts with the characters and everything. Do your kids love the characters, like the Jellystone characters?
Yeah, so my oldest was her favorite is still Boo Boo. Our last trip to Delaware beaches in October was actually the first time that she didn't care whether or not she got a picture, and I was it hurt a little bit. But she still does like that. And then our youngest one, we'll see how it goes this summer. She was less than a year old the last time we were at a campground and was enamored. Hopefully we're not reaching the fear stage and we'll still be interested. But she's definitely curious about costume characters, so we'll see how that goes this year.
Go ahead.
Do they watch the new Jellystone series, the Yogi Bear series?
I have to openly admit that none of us have ever seen any of it.
It's different.
The animation style is that sort of new. I don't know how to describe it. So it is definitely different.
So, Phil, are your travels driven by where else you're headed? Is it a location based thing when you're picking out a place to camp?
No, really. It's been about sort of what the campground has to offer more than anything else. We've actually, other than for running out to get something from a store, there's really only one trip that we've ever spent real time away from the campground on. A few years ago when we were at Luray and we had family with us, we were there for like a week. And we did go see the caverns at Luray. But typically, once we're there, and we're there to camp and enjoy what the park has to offer.
So you start this Facebook page, and I'm sure you thought, well, I'll get a few people that'll come in and play with me. What happened?
So it's interesting. I think a couple things helped. One, there was a lot of buy-in from people who worked at Jellystones. Initially, individual parks, and then since then, we've had people from, well, now it's Camp Jellystone. It was LSI, who joined the group, and some of these people were very responsive and would interact with campers on there. It helps that we sort of, I guess I would say, I run somewhat of a tight ship in the group. We don't really allow for too many things going off the rails, and I think that's why staffers kind of feel welcome. And then really it was summer of 2021. We got to 5,000 group members, and that was the first time that we had a couple stays where Parks had us out hosting us as influencers or whatever the term is. And then last year, it blew me away. We got to the point where we were last summer. Of course, its membership is it sort of drops in the off season. But last summer, we were getting to the point where we were adding 1,000 members at a time within a couple weeks. So we went from 5,000 to over 10,000 last year, and we went up above 11,000 members a month or two ago. I am sort of tracking it, and it doesn't seem like we're going to have the same sort of like doubling this year. That's probably partially due to the fact that the whole COVID camping boom is probably somewhat behind us. And I think there's probably fewer first-timers. And then there is also just the factor of, I think, are we reaching saturation with how many Jellystone diehards we've reached? I mean, we're just capturing most of the people. But that's okay. It's still growing. I frankly don't know if I could manage it if it doubled every year.
So what was the initial reaction like from those executives at Jellystone? Were they receptive to the idea that they had a Facebook site out there that they didn't control?
Yeah, well, I don't know early on, simply because those who had joined from LSI directly were pretty quiet, and for the most part, they still are. They have a marketing person who has posted a couple times in the group since then, but that's been within the last year. I started to hear from friends I had made and management at different parks that, oh yeah, they're starting to talk about it. And then every now and then I hear, well, we were just at this meeting or we were just at symposium and your name kept coming up, and I'm like, I hope it was all good. And they say, of course, but I never get any more details than that, so I really don't know what the conversations are.
I think looking at the two groups is interesting, because I think if you guys can see that, we're on the Jellystone group page, which you have to ask to be added to. But you see like the campers come in here and you post updates on different things. It looks like you guys are having a picnic fest, which is kind of cool, a group gathering here in June. But that
is in Ohio. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is in Ohio. They take pictures and they'll post them to this group, the campers, and then they help each other out with different things. So that's kind of cool. And then you go to your, your Jellyheads fan page, and it really does have a lot of buy-in from like the parks. I notice you share a lot from the parks. So this is from Rustic Acres, talking about what dates are sold out. You mention some improvements down here. This is from the Birmingham, New York. You can win a stay. You mentioned some of the improvements for the Columbus North Park. So it's kind of two different things. You're kind of keeping people updated on what's going on with the Jellystone Park system with this group. I mean, I imagine that the parks have to love the free marketing to some degree, right?
Yeah, they certainly, and that's the interesting thing about when you're running something like this that's franchise based, right? Is obviously I've developed a relationship with a few folks at Camp Jellystone itself, but then obviously individual parks or the companies that own individual parks. So, I have a good relationship with Great Escapes and I have a good relationship with Northgate, and between those two, that's I'm probably 40% of the system. And then obviously Camp Jellystone is owned by Sun, and that's another group of campgrounds that are in the system. So, yeah, it's pretty much been a very good relationship across the board.
A couple questions for me. How much time do you take to administer something like this, and how do you keep it from becoming a complaint site?
Yeah, so the time is not too bad. The content I can generate after a trip is probably the most work intensive, obviously, because I'm trying to do edited video and things like that. But yeah, you would think that 11,000 person Facebook group would be unwieldy. I've been in groups that are much smaller where it is a problem. But I think that we established sort of early that it's not intended to be like your personal gripe fest. We've got a little more open over the years to, people have if it's what seems like a fair review and there are actual issues, I'm not just going to take it down immediately. And I think for the most part, camp staff and administrators have been pretty open to that now, that they're going to sort of see some of that feedback and respond to it. But in terms of stuff that just goes completely off the rails, I'm neither myself nor, when we have other moderators, that helps. We will not hesitate to just kick someone out if it's clearly across the line. We have pretty established rules. Same thing with spam posts. Sometimes I'll delete it, give the person the benefit of the doubt they didn't read a rule or they got hacked or something, but if it comes right back, they're gone. I'm happy to say that I think in almost 4 years now, I've only really ever gotten one nasty private message after taking a moderation action. So I don't know if it's because we set a tone early, if it's just people who camp are just nice people. But we've been pretty fortunate that we haven't had too much to deal with. This is the time of year where things will get more active as people are actually taking trips. And we do have to do a little bit more moderation. And I do have what are we up to now? Six other moderators, 6 or 7 from different parts of the country that help out as well. And I'm excited because a couple of them I'm going to meet for the first time at this event we have coming up in Ohio. So that'll be fun.
How do you decide that somebody's going to be a good moderator? Like, how did you find these 6 people?
So when the first round of them, I think it was 4. Okay, I think we do have 7. The first 4, I kind of just sent out feelers. Fill out a form if you're interested, right? And I kind of also paid attention. Are these people who had posted a lot in the group? Do they post things that are valuable? Do they seem rational? That's always helpful. Are they in the group a fair amount so you know that they're actually there and it would be a benefit to have them moderating? And then the second time around, I was aware enough there were specific people that I actually reached out and asked, one of whom was interested the first time. And at that point, it just didn't make sense. We didn't need that many moderators. And then the other 2 were people specifically who were active in the group and were in different parts of the country. Because even though you don't have to be in a certain part of the country to be like, an effective moderator, I like the idea of representation, that these are going to be people who are, probably voicing opinions more often and posting more, and to have them not just in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, which is where most of us were, I think was helpful.
I think it's interesting, your comment too about them being like rational. That's something like we talk about on the marketing end when we talk about responding to reviews, do that in like a private channel. because you never know, argumentative people too. Like sometimes, and I tend to be this way, like somebody will mention something, then I'll just argue with them for like 2 or 3 hours. And you probably don't want a moderator like that either, where they're just going to sit there and argue for a long time. So,
yeah, for sure.
He's kind of hard to get along with. Obviously, we can see that you've got merchandise out there. You're wearing the Jellyheads shirt. Are you making any money here? Is this something you can monetize a little bit through Facebook?
I mean, if you want to talk about revenue, I guess so I've made a modicum of revenue between, merchandise sales, and now I'm a Camp Spot affiliate. I think I've had 2 actual referrals so far, so that's still in the process. It's hard to get people that people will say like, oh yeah, sure, I'll use your link, but then they go back and look later, and then it's fine. I'm not losing any sleep over that. It was, that was an idea that Camp Spot had. They approached me, and I was, happy to do it. Obviously, anything is great, but in terms of a profit, it's cool to be hosted, that's for sure. It's nice to have trips and these opportunities, but it obviously also costs money to travel. So if you took the amount of money that we're actually getting and subtracted it from what it costs just to go places, it's still, we're not coming out on the positive side yet, but who knows? But it is a nice thing. If people want to buy stuff, they can certainly get it and, show off the group and everything like that. So that's cool.
So we've got 70 some Jellystones out there and growing. Is there plans to get to them all?
Me personally, well, I would love to. It is obviously difficult when you're talking about something like camping, and even in a cabin, to be able to travel somewhere. Usually that's not by plane, but it would be neat, obviously, to do that. I would love, and I've bounced this idea around, to get to the point where maybe there's a couple other people working on content in different parts of the country on a regular basis, and then we could cover more things more in depth. As it is, sometimes there are really good reviews posted in the group. When I say good, I don't mean glowing like sunshine and rainbows. I mean good, like thorough, right? People who've written a thorough review and have some photos, and I'll reach out and ask them, do you mind if I take this and also put it on the public page? That's a way to generate more content that way as well. But I would love to maybe have a few people who were in different parts of the country who sort of did this on a regular basis, so we could cover more things. But I have a short list of parks that I would love to get to that are in different parts of the country. So this summer will be neat, since we're leaving, our little home here in the Mid-Atlantic area and venturing out into Ben's neck of the woods, actually. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, southern Michigan, northern Ohio, I guess, I'll admit Ohio's a state. I'm from Michigan, but Ohio is down there, I guess. And then Indiana's pretty nice this time of year. But we'll take a second and recognize our sponsor, and we'll be right back. WCM's Park Update is being brought to you by Woodall's Campground Magazine. For over 5 decades, Woodall's Campground Magazine has aimed to provide park owners and operators with the relevant industry news they need to run their businesses more efficiently. As times have changed, so has Woodall's Campground Magazine. Besides just its print publication, which is distributed to more than 14,000 industry professionals every month, the magazine also reaches readers through its various social media platforms, including Facebook at WoodallCM, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Woodall's Campground Magazine also offers a daily e-blast which highlights the top news from the industry. The best part, everything we do is advertiser supported and free to our readers. As the outdoor hospitality industry continues to grow at a rapid pace, it is important to stay up to date on trends and other relevant news. Subscribe to Woodall's Campground Magazine at woodallscm.com. Hi, welcome back to WCM's Park Update, and our guest is Phil Ticknor, founder of and manager of the Jellyheads Community, which focuses mainly on Jellystone Parks. Obviously, with the name, that makes sense. So I guess, what are some of the things you hear from campers? I know we talked a little bit about the fact that you try to keep everything positive, that you don't really want people complaining too much on the website or the Facebook page. I guess, what are some things that you do hear from people as far as when they're trying to book stays or like staying at campgrounds or different things? What are some of the complaints that maybe you do hear, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the low-hanging fruit here is there's always going to be people who are upset with how much things cost, especially now. But I try to frame that, and that's not to say we can't talk about that in the group, but I try to frame it as value, right? So if there is a specific place that, is super expensive and, maybe it's the time of year where they don't have all their amenities open. Okay, well, is that the right value for you? Like, right, let's have these conversations. And because the system is franchised, let's look at like, okay, if this place is too much for you, would you have a good time here? Doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it has great activities program or something like that. So that's obviously the top one, but there's only so many things that can be done about, how expensive something's going to be. I think some of the other ones are certainly sometimes concerns happen if staffing is low and things aren't open or things aren't being kept up from a cleanliness standpoint. Me personally, there's a laundry list of things that would be great if they could ever be enacted. I know I'm probably not the only one who feels this way. If we get to the point where, most of the Jellystones do use CampSpot for reservations online, if we could get to a point where we can modify right on our own and we don't have to call to do a short change to our reservation, things like that come back through. I know we have had some people comment in the past, and I agree that sometimes you'll go to a park and there's the presence of the actual characters is not as much as there has been. I think that's turned around the last couple of years. I don't want to take full credit from that from our group, but I think some of the park owners have been receptive to that issue. That is sort of one of the big differentiators. So you sort of scratch your head if you go to a Jellystone Park and you don't see the characters that often, and then certainly how they interact. To me, that's a big selling point. If you have characters who have clearly rehearsed bits and mannerisms that come across and they're not just wooden and slowly waving, that can make a big difference. And that's certainly training for the people who are wearing those costumes. But otherwise, it's not a huge expense, right? You don't have to build a multi-million-dollar splash pad to be able to do that. And it makes a big difference, I think. And certainly it appeals to kids, but even adults. I think it's nice for us to see that interaction and not just sort of you can tell the people who want to be in the suits versus the people who just got stuck in the suits, right? You can always tell.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Do you think some of that is due to staffing? Like, do you think that's been a struggle over the last few years, is just finding the staff to get in those characters maybe, and maybe that's easing a little bit?
Yeah, and I think everyone I've talked to would say that they've had challenges with staffing. But I will say every park we've been to over the last couple of years, people will say that. But there have been parks where you can tell there's a staffing issue, and there are parks where you can't tell there's a staffing issue, right? So some of that is top-down stuff and training and management. But I do certainly hope that some of that staffing issue has been resolved. But I will say that pre-COVID, there were a couple. We had only been to a couple prior, but I noticed that sometimes that character's a little wooden, right, and stuff like that. So, I know it's tough. A lot of times we're talking about seasonal employees who are in college or even high school, but anybody can pull into a Chick-fil-A and they see the service they get there, and we're talking about the same demographic who's working at Chick-fil-A, right? So, I think that's a big piece of it.
To be fair, we did talk with the president of Jellystone a few weeks ago, and obviously when we were visiting with him, he brought up the fact that training is a re-emphasis on training is a big part of what they're going to be, the direction they're going to be heading now. So that's a pretty cool thing. So when you're a Jellyhead, right now it's just being a member of the Facebook page. Is this something you see developing into a membership type organization that probably gets some benefits when you're in a park?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that would be certainly a more formal relationship than we've had with Camp Jellystone so far. Certainly, it doesn't hurt in some cases. I know there's certain parks that have been, very nice to not just myself, but other people who they know are in the group. It certainly is a benefit if somebody from that park is in the group and they've seen you in the group, and but that's much more informal. It would be great to develop something that was more of a contact-based system, as one of the challenges we're finding with the event we have coming up next month is, people respond to a Facebook event, but then the follow-up of like, okay, how many of you are actually coming versus who checked the box? And we're already working on that for next year. We have another park hosting next July of 24, which will be our 5-year anniversary of the group. I can't say who it is yet, sorry. I promised this year's park I wouldn't do it until we're at at that park. But I'm already talking to them about what's an easier way to track this. But ultimately, yeah, if we had some sort of real membership, that would make it even more formal.
So what? Do you guys do anything with Campers app? I know a lot of Jellystones use the Campers app. Are there any like partnerships you guys do with that particular piece, or is that something you guys promote through your pages?
Well, I mean, I know they're tied together, right? Like the Jellystone
Yeah.
app is basically like just a facelifted version of Camper's app, and it's all the same info that goes in. It's just it looks a little different.
Yep.
And we obviously push the app because there's a lot of people who are new to it who don't know about it, and a lot of times that's the place to find the activity schedule, other than on a sheet of paper when you get there. But I don't have any sort of I don't actually have a contact with Camper's app at all, so it would be
Okay.
I would love to talk to them, sure.
Um, I know this. I know when we had Rob Shooter on, the president of Camp Jellystone, a few weeks ago, we were still talking about the Sun Outdoors acquisition of Jellystone Park, even though it's been a year and a half, maybe 2 years since the acquisition took place. Is that still something that is talked about in your groups? Are people coming around to what Sun Outdoors is doing with the Jellystone system? I guess is that still a concern for people?
Yeah,
I don't.
I don't know if a lot of people in the group are like completely clued in on that piece of
Okay.
it. I think there's a lot of people who are aware of Sun and Northgate and Great Escapes owning so many of the individual parks, and there's certainly people who have mixed feelings about the corporate presence across the
Yeah.
franchise. But I don't think I've really seen any pushback in either direction in terms of Sun owning Camp Jellystone. To me, it's been fascinating just because they obviously are one of the individual owners of Jellystone campgrounds, and then there's the whole dynamic where Northgate is in some ways a competitor of Sun, but now they own parks in Jellystone, and they also own Camp Spot, or it's a affiliate company of some sort.
Yeah.
So there's the camping world I've learned is very tied together. It's very interwoven between these companies. So, but on my end, what I've seen so far, I've really liked. Obviously, what Mike mentioned about the re-emphasis on characters. I know that's been sort of an initiative since Sun came in.
Yeah.
Expansion has certainly last year, for example, was a big year in terms of picking up new parks. And I have a feeling this is now just conjecture, right? But we saw a couple parks leave the system this past year that I haven't been to, so I can't cast aspersions, but that I would have thought of as sort of smaller, less frills campgrounds for the most part. And while I like the wide variety across the system, right, I do think that people who are looking at Jellystones consumer wise, they want to see a floor, right, that is maybe higher than where the floor is, right? They want to have a certain level of expectation when they come to a Jellystone, what that means. And as much as it like is cool to have the variation, and there'll always be variation. Geography, for one, it just automatically makes variation. It's not a theme park, right? So there's always going to be things that are different from park to park. But I do think that it would be less confusing for consumers if there's either sort of a baseline or they take a model. I'll pull from KOA. They take a model where there's different parks designated in different classifications, so you have some idea of like, okay, there's a reason why North Texas is so much more expensive than Alabama Gulf Coast, right? And if you like, wow, look at this one, it's so much cheaper. Okay, but understand the parks are very different. And I think from a consumer level, it's anything that can be done to sort of make people understand that. Of course, we're sort of playing that role now, right? So, I think there's just a lot of people out there who think seen them all, like it's Great Wolf Lodge, but outside, but that's not really how it works.
So you started this when right before COVID.
Yeah,
and
it's great timing.
And you mentioned earlier the huge influx of new campers, of folks that got into just to get outside. Do you think that really changed the parks at all? I mean, did it force them to do things differently when they had so many brand new type campers?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's probably continuing. And one thing I see creep up from time to time in the group that always rubs me the wrong way as a relative newbie to camping and as a cabin camper is sometimes there's some not so nice things said by longtime campers about cabin campers, and I know what they really mean by that. So, yeah, I think that parks had to adjust. There's certainly a different expectation level, and it varies from person to person, right? Like when I came into this, I was like, oh, cool, a campground, and I didn't expect a cabin to be looking like a hotel room, right? Like, but some people kind of have that idea, and especially, to be honest, if they're paying $300-400 a night, they are kind of expecting a different level of service or what have you, and they're surprised to find out that in most places there are no linens, or you have to pay extra for linens, or so many other things. So I think that's probably been an adjustment, and different campgrounds have sort of had to go in different directions, like who were we marketing to. But you'd be hard pressed to find a park in the system that hasn't added a significant number of cabins in the last few years. Are they going to hit a point where that newcomer stuff kind of ebbs back and now they're looking at empty cabins? I don't know. But that would be the only fix for people who think the prices are too high, right? So, but we'll see. I think this will be an interesting summer. I've been tracking some things, looking at where availability is at certain popular campgrounds, at least that I'm familiar with. And I think the peak has probably passed.
Have you ever been to the North Texas Jellystone? Or is that one on your bucket list?
That is literally number one on my bucket list. The sheer size of everything they have, and certainly when they built that pirate ship, that thing opened like the first year of the group, and I'm like, what is going on? I need to go stay in this someday. And now they're turning grain silos into cabins, and I mean the accommodation. What they're offering is absurd. It's like a laundry list. Like I could probably stay in like 3 or 4 different things there, and it'd be a brand new experience versus what anybody else has. It's definitely at the top of the list.
So when you visit a place, do you let them know you're coming? Who you are? Do you play that card?
So obviously, like now, and every place that we're going along our little tour here this summer is a hosted stay. So if we have that relationship, obviously they know. Otherwise, if we're coming in, I probably think the last Jellystone trip we went on that I don't think the people who were like checking us in really knew or anything was Quarryville in 2021 in June. And but since that, even when we've just gone on vacation and paid our own way and everything, there's been people who work there or the owners or the managers who are in the group, so they kind of know what I'm coming. But I'm not ever looking for special treatment other than obviously if we're hosted, but then I feel a very big obligation, and we try to do that, pumping out a lot of content, and then I'll usually afterwards at least have an edited cabin tour video, an edited campground review, and campground tour video. And again, you're like, well, if you're getting hosted, are you really giving an honest review? Well, I'm not going to necessarily slam a place unless we really have a truly horrible experience, but I will talk about the differences, right? Like we were at Mill Run last year, which that wasn't hosted, but people talk about, it's very hilly and there's lots of golf carts and there's lots of golf cart noise. And the reality is there is a lot of golf carts, and the rentals are gas, and so there is a lot of noise, and there are hills, but it didn't really bother us. But people need to know that when they're making choices, right? There's also a ton to do, and the reality about Mill Run is, for the amount of amenities they have, there's a reason why they book up like a year in advance, because the prices are still pretty reasonable. So it's a trade-off, right? All these places, there are like, it just depends on what you're looking for. It feels like a cop-out answer, but a lot of people will ask me, well, which is your favorite? And I'm like, well, let me just give me like 2 choices, and I'll talk about both of them, and you'll see the differences, basically.
Well, I think that's an important discussion. We do hear a lot of negative things in the campground industry, especially from like new campers. They'll go try a campground and then they'll maybe post like some really negative comments on social media or whatever. But I think it's important to realize for campers that not every campground is going to be for you. So like if you don't like Mill Run, that doesn't mean that the whole industry is like Mill Run. Not saying that Mill Run's bad, but that just fits a certain segment of campers. You could still find a campground that fits your lifestyle or what you like. It's out there. So I think as new campers, it's worth it just to travel around and explore. That's part of the fun of the lifestyle.
Yeah, the Western Pennsylvania Jellystone thing was always like the absolute greatest example, because both Cozy Rest and Mill Run for years were so highly regarded,
Yep.
And each have their own diehard fans, and they are, other than both having the Jellystone brand and the characters, completely different campgrounds. We love them both, but they could not be more different. And it's just like, which thing are you looking for? So that's sort of how I point people in a direction between those two. But I will say the people who live between the two of them, they have it pretty good.
Yeah.
So, Phil, any desire to have the inside the bear suit experience?
Oh gosh. So I've never been inside of a mascot costume, but I've seen what it involves. In my former job, when I worked in sort of the college athletics world, I was part of the group that put together our first actual formalized mascot costume, and saw how that had to get put together. And you have to take a break every like 30 minutes, or you're just pouring in sweat. So I do not have a huge desire to get inside that costume.
I go to Detroit Tigers games. I was at a game a few weeks ago, saw the Tiger, and they run that Tiger all over that stadium for the entire game. And he's lucky this year because they shortened the games by like 45 minutes now with that pitch clock. But yeah, I mean, in the hot sun, can't imagine doing that, especially in like a Yogi Bear costume in the middle of July, like up here in Michigan when the humidity is like 90%. Yeah,
you got to have something like that, Ben, because nobody's watching the Tigers.
Yeah, well, yeah, they do suck, so we aren't gonna discount that. But it's still good to get a hot dog. But well, thanks, Phil, for coming on the show. I think it's our time to go. We talked bad about the Tigers. We talked bad about Ohio. I hope you guys have a good first picnic together as a group there in Columbus, Ohio. Hopefully that goes well, and hopefully the group continues to thrive. So.
And you're looking for more Jellyheads, Phil. So how do you sign up?
Absolutely. So if you just go on Facebook and you can just search Jellyheads Community, that's the group. I certainly love it if people actually follow the Facebook page. It's Jellyheads We Love the Bear Parks. And then on Instagram, it's Jellyheads Photos. And then YouTube, it's Jellyheads TV, which is also on TikTok. But I will tell you, I literally just started posting things on TikTok, and I post and I leave because I still do not quite understand the whole TikTok universe. But it's out there, so I've started to put a little bit of content there. But really, it's Facebook, and then YouTube is a nice place to go find the good edited campground tours and everything like that, and an easy to find place.
You need to get just real quick before you go. Here's an idea. You need to get some of your campers to send you TikTok material to put on the TikTok site.
That doesn't work in Montana anymore, Ben. They outlawed it in Montana.
In some states it's banned already. Pretty soon it'll probably be banned in the entire country. But until then, you can use your campers to fill the TikTok page.
Yeah,
they probably love it and share it. Who knows? You may be the hottest thing on TikTok. So until they ban it. So
somehow everyone on TikTok has like 1 million followers. I don't know how it works.
I don't know.
I think you have to be a 16-year-old girl.
So, all right. Well, it was great talking to you, Phil, and thanks everyone for watching. And we'll see everyone next week.
Bye, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com. Show hosts are Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. Executive producers Rick Kessler and Alex Burkett. Copyright 2022, G&G Media Group.